Let's go right to the phones, the the Ed Alexander live line, as we like to call it. We now name it after Ed. Good morning to Valerie Cavasos from KGA 9. Good morning, Valerie.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good. It's very early.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I work at the weekends, and so I'm off the air, and by the time I get home, it's like 11:30 at night.
Yeah. This is no different than when we have one of the actors come in from Arizona Theater Company, and they did a show where they ended at 11, had a late dinner, and then they got to show up at this place at 6:30. You were smart enough to stay home and call in, though. So you can do it in your pajamas, where these other people got to dress up and show up here. So, well, first of all, please tell everyone if they've just came off of a spaceship. How long has Valerie Cavasos been doing this news thing, and where have you been doing it for the last so many years?
Oh, you mean my history?
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah, I'm actually a native from Tucson, graduated from the U of A.
What high school did you go to?
My first television job.
What high school did you go to?
Santa Rita.
Okay. Just want to
I'm actually a product of TUSD.
I just wanted to get that out.
And when the graduating class was, I think it was about 600 or so when I graduated from Santa Rita. Much different now. But, my first job was in New England. This was back in 1985, 86. And I worked for 12 years, over there. I was a reporter in Boston. I was an main anchor in Hartford, Connecticut, worked in Albany, New York, various other markets, worked in South Bend, Indiana, and then I came home to raise my kids. So I came back in 1999. I worked at Channel 13 first for 5 years, took a 7-year break, produced my own show called Live in Latin, and then came back to KGA 9 because the news director at the time, Forrest Carr, he was incredible with investigations, and I really wanted to kind of hone my skills with that, and he was a great teacher. My current news director, we worked through a lot of these issues as well, a number of issues, and we've come across some pretty, I would say, widespread issues in Tucson that I think has just been there, sitting there, falling under the radar, and things have brought it above the radar, and this is where we're picking up some of these stories.
So your reporting on TUSD has been so good and so prevalent. You have your own little section now on the front page of the website.
Yeah, I do. There's enough there.
So you have covered the discipline problems. We've talked about campaign donation issues with a couple of the incumbents, and there's so many things to talk about. But we emailed previously. We're going to talk about the discipline side of what's going on at TUSD, because this is some of the basics of education. Is the idea that your kid gets to learn in a safe environment. So what was the first story that really got you into, that got your attention, that you dove into?
Well, this was back, Booth Fickett actually started this story when a parent had come to me, and we had reported about the problems at Seacrest first. I wasn't on that story, but then the Booth Fickett story came to me, and it was the same problems. So then I looked into that, and I began investigating that. And when I pick up investigations is when I feel that something is systemic. Otherwise, it kind of falls into what we say, like a day turn, a 9 on your side, maybe 2 or 3 day investigation. And all of us do that. But to pull it into an investigation that could take weeks or possibly even months, I'm really looking for the systemic problems. And we started to see the same patterns, and that's what I look for as well. What are the issues that the common denominators? And so that's what I was comparing to some of these other stories. And when the Booth Fickett story surfaced, and we did not expect for what happened to the principal of him being shown the door after our interview, I think sometimes it sends up a red flag. What is going on here? And so that started the entire series into discipline issues.
Now, just to refresh some people's history, the Sechrist middle school discussion actually kind of ended. I remember, was it the honor students addressed the board and said, "Can you please help our school? It's really getting tough in here to go to school." Wasn't it?
I believe so. And then they did bring a team in to try to fix the issues over there. But I was getting word when I started the Booth Thicket, looking into Booth Thicket, that Sechrist was still having problems. There were some insiders who had come to me and said that, they fixed some of the problems, but not all of the problems. And there then was a pattern that I was discovering as well.
Hey, I need to go to break, but I want to ask you one more question before we go to break. When you talk about the time that it takes to do an investigative piece, because some of the things I've heard from newspaper people is that their editors aren't willing to devote that kind of time and money to that much investigation because they say the payoff possibly may not be there. What's the payoff on the back end for the station? Because there's an economics to doing investigative reporting.
Absolutely, and I think that's what's falling off, and this is I think across the nation, especially with all of the cuts in newspaper and just everywhere. It's across the board. And there's the difference of, do you spend money? Do you give those resources? And time is the factor here, because time is the commodity. Do you invest a month or two? Well, if there isn't the big payout at the end, and what we're looking at, when we say payout, it's not monetary, it's the impact on the community.
Sure.
And if there's not enough impact on the community, then is it worth all of that time? And so in this case, especially with the discipline, especially with the district that affects not only just the students themselves, the teachers, the parents, but it goes beyond that because of the economic impact that TUSD, the largest district, has on Pima County. So this one was worth it. And I'll have to say this because I know you have to go to the break.
Yep.
That it really is, it's the sources. And when you have a lot of sources, you can, in a sense, propel the investigation. Otherwise, if you're waiting for a lot of things, there were a lot of FOIA requests that I was waiting for, and that's the Freedom of Information Act documents. And there were some that I waited months to get certain information, so that can slow something down. But when you have sources that tell you, look here, I'm going to provide you with some information, let me tell you what happened to me, the experience, then that kind of moves an investigation forward quicker.
7:18 in the morning. Valerie, please hold on for a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
We have Valerie Cavasos, K-Gun 9, Santa Rita grad, who's doing a lot of great investigative work on Tucson's largest school district. If you have a question, comment, 790-2040, wakeuptucson@gmail.com. Wake Up Tucson, you're on the way to Valerie Cavasos, K-Gun 9 News. Our friend Kate from Brood, of course, says Santa Rita representing Go Eagles, so that just came through. We're talking about your stories that you have been covering on TUSD and discipline. Again, you have your own section of the front page of kgun.com. If anyone wants to look at all of hers in a row, they're all listed right there. So for the last so many months, let's move over to Palo Verde, because this is like after Booth Thicket. We had Charles Bermudez on the show after you did that story and how he was approved to talk to you, and he gets shown the door the next day after exposing these problems. Let's transition to Palo Verde. How did that get on your radar?
That came to me from sources. So, and again, a lot of the stories do. They really want to get the information out. And the reason why a lot of people will tell me, go look somewhere. And so they gave me this hint that there was a letter that was written. There were some serious problems, and the police chief back then, Roberto Villaseñor, had written a letter to Sanchez about the problems. So I had requested that information from TPD, and there was the letter. So that started that entire investigation.
So let's refresh everyone's memory. Here's a Palo Verde High School over on 22nd and Kolb, if you're not familiar with Tucson. And they really had an amazing comeback kind of academically with a former Titan, the principal there. And then what happens discipline-wise the next year that it all kind of goes to pot?
That was a lenient policy. Everybody in teaching knows. And I taught for a year, actually, at a charter school. So one thing I've learned about teaching the 1 year that I was there is that it's harder than anybody thinks.
Sure.
And when you're dealing with, especially in that area that has some, I would say, gang kids, and I haven't researched that or investigated that part, so I don't know how prevalent it is. But even just having 2 or 3 or 4 of those kinds of students in there can be fairly disruptive. Now, give them some leniency, and that was where the problems really erupted. These teachers' hands were tied. Even though we reported and we were told by this highly, highly confidential source that the principal said his hands were tied, I just don't know how deep. I did not talk to the principal himself. And so, but again, the highly, highly credible source had said that the principal had said his hands were tied. And that's been the issue. It is a lenient policy because of the restorative practices, and that's what set all of this in motion.
What about, so this is the commonality in lots of the 3 stories between Booth, Fickett, Palo Verde, and then your most recent one with the teacher Celeste Ajo. Now, this is a story, she was teaching in an elementary school and talking about biting and getting hit in the shoulder by a student that had some sort of metal object in their hand and tearing her rotator cuff. And we talked about that story on Friday. We played your story. And then Friday afternoon, you get I get manila envelopes from Chuck Huckleberry. You get an open letter to K-Gun 9.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Yes. As we say in the investigative world, if the people you're doing stories on or the entities you're doing stories on don't hate you, then you're not doing your job. So I guess I'm doing my job.
So HC in this open letter talks about how he's talking about how, of course, he's critical of your journalism in this, and then also talking about going after the teacher. But you can't talk about, I in relation to the teacher, but let's talk about your process in getting the story, and then in relation to why he's critical of you, and give us the reality of your reporting on this.
Yeah, this was a teacher. Now, again, in context, when I started the story, I had heard from dozens of teachers, and this covered the span since I started, about teachers being assaulted. And so, and some of it quite severe. I already reported on a teacher at Cholla High School who was put in a chokehold. But when you hear that kindergartners can really wreak havoc in a classroom, I mean, it's understandable, because if you've ever been in, daycare, if you remember kindergarten, that when you have a whole bunch of kids that are in the classroom and, in a sense, your hands are tied as a teacher and you can't dole out certain discipline. And I'm not talking about calling police, just doling out just regular discipline, detention or anything like that. And then you don't have these restorative practices in place to follow up. Well, sure, then a kind of chaos can erupt. This is all over. I mean, there are so many teachers who have told me that they've been hurt, students throwing chairs, and it only takes, again, like 1 or 2 students inside. This particular teacher faced this for 2 years. This wasn't the only student. This was just an example. And I had put that in my piece too. For example, this is what had happened to her. And this is how severe things can get. if your hands are tied. So in this process, and I had been working on it for, I don't know, probably about a month. The story was to air earlier, and Stephanie Bowe, who is the PIO, Public Information Officer, I had given her even an earlier date, so they expected it to air earlier. And it was pushed back because of the campaign finance story, and I had to work on that, so it pushed this other story back. So it finally aired. Now, Stephanie Bowe had come to me and told me, you don't want to do the story on Celeste Aho because she has some issues. And it's interesting because she said, consider the source. Well, I also consider the source. And I'm not quite sure that's correct information is what she was telling me. The thing is that Celeste Aho was very upfront with me. I already knew these issues.
Right.
She told me all of the issues, and I waited. And I looked at, and I know because I've been in the not only investigating schools, education, but also being a teacher myself, just being privy to some of the inside things that are going on, especially at a administrative level. What really is an investigation is not like what I consider an investigation or maybe what you consider an investigation. It's just the process that happens inside a school. But, you know, there's so many different things that happens to teachers, and we know, and I have reported the retaliation, the severe retaliation when teachers speak up or they might not want to follow protocol because it's not working in their classrooms, as was the case with Celeste Aho. She was a veteran teacher, and again, she had accolades of awards or nominated for awards, and Sanchez had even come into the class and said, boy, if every class was like this, then how great the district would be. So I weighed all of that. But no, she was very upfront with me. I already knew the information. I didn't really need to see the FOIA request. They also delayed it. She knew that I was going on vacation for about a week. So they had plenty of time to prepare this FOIA, all the FOIA documents. They had plenty of time to prepare for that. I have waited months sometimes to get information from them. I'm not going to stop an investigation because they're going to make me wait months for these documents. And she was a credible source, veteran teacher. We discussed everything, so it felt comfortable for her to be somewhat of an example of what I've been hearing, similar things. I actually even said it in my intro into my story, which was I usually picked, what I did was I picked some of the similar things that was happening to other teachers.
Yep.
And it could get that bad where a teacher is hurt because trying to stop. And I hope that they do realize in this piece as well, TUSD, that the students were being assaulted, and she was assaulted because she was stepping in to prevent the students from being assaulted. And that seem to be missed, or whether they're ignoring that issue as well. But and again, this is why some of the other students in the Paula Verde story, there's a connection there too. Other students were pummeled. They were punched from other students inside classrooms. They would just come in, they would walk in, get punched, and then the student would leave. So again, common denominators.
We played your piece during the first hour on Friday, and we get a message from a middle school teacher on the southwest side in TUSD who's listening to this saying, hey, on Wednesday, the principal was removing a belligerent student when the student bit him twice and then threatened to assassinate the principal and his daughter. This is as we're listening to you do the story at the 6:30. So it's all over, Valerie.
Well, I also got information to people leaving messages, and there was a teacher who said, yeah, those are valid points. So, TUSD, as they've done, is deflect and deny, and it's been since the very start of this. Look, I'm a product of TUSD. I understand the importance of the impact that TUSD has in Pima County. all the colleges. You have to prepare them.
Sure.
But when you are hiding information from the public, it is our job. We are watchdog journalists. That's what we do. We look after the government. When we see something that is a concern, it is our responsibility as journalists to bring that to light. Now, what the normal course of action is, and with any superintendent, I have a lot of sources that they give me background information. Even before I ever go forward with any of my stories, I check with these people. These are my very highly confidential sources. And one in particular had said, first what you do as a district, if you're a superintendent, the first thing that you do is, why did it get to the media? What happened here?
Right.
And so, but it did. So now let's look at the issues. Okay, let's try to fix this. Is it true? Is it not? Let's try to fix this. What is true? What is not? Then you go back to the reporter, you get it all done, you come up with a plan, you go back to the reporter and say, here's what we've done. So that's the normal course. That's what I usually see as a reporter, and not even just these investigations, just in general, in any of our stories that we do, so sometimes just a day turn.
So we have this snarky little letter from HT, and of course he says, if you have any questions, he wants to hear from you. I've noticed that he's never interviewed on your pieces. They throw Abel Morato at you and these various folks. Has there been an attempt to get him on camera and he doesn't do it? What's that relationship like?
No, I do. I did interview him early on.
Right.
And there was a sit-down interview with him. It was about an hour. And basically he said that there was a communication problem. He did admit that there was a communication problem, but he said the communication problem was with the principals, that the principals were not understanding what he wanted. And so, but he said there really are no issues. And had he said, well, there's some issues, let's look into this, then that might have stopped the investigation. But in this case, people kept coming to me because after that interview, they're saying, no, there are still some issues here. And then that continued the investigation.
So HT gave you the please disperse, there's nothing to see here?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's sad. Well, Valerie, again, when you say watchdog journalism, you're truly doing it, and it is totally appreciated because the community needs more of that. I feel like we have so many few sources of that anymore that I am so happy, and there are so many people in this community that are thrilled, including Ed Alexander, our Rincon Ranger from 1960, whatever he's from.
I've seen it for 40 years, if not more.
And he's a taxpayer all those years, too. So we appreciate what you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Valerie. Have an amazing day. That's Valerie Cavasos, K-Gun 9 News. This is seriously, when you get the open letter from HT on the TUSD website, you are over the target. You are catching the flack. You are over the target, just like getting manila envelopes from Big Huckleberry. HT is starting to act like Little Huckleberry. There's nothing to see here. It's pretty pathetic over there. So 7:37 in the morning.
How many times have you mentioned that if you wanted to come on here? He's welcome anytime, right?
Well, HT can have an hour with me.
Yeah.
Bring it on, HT. Love to have you. Bring all your folders and envelopes and all that good stuff. So let's go pay some bills. Ed Alexander, Christy Simone, Wake Up Tucson, 1030 Voice.